Every year in the United States, thousands of people walk into forests and are never seen again. Not in the way crime documentaries usually show disappearance, not with blood trails or final screams caught on camera, but with something far worse, something quieter, because these people do not vanish in chaos, they vanish in silence, as if the forest itself simply closes around them and erases their existence without effort or resistance. No bodies are recovered, no final phone calls explain what happened. No clues remain except disturbed leaves, broken branches, and the unsettling knowledge that a human being stood there one moment and was completely gone the next. Search teams enter these woods expecting accidents or injuries, but instead they report hearing footsteps behind them when no one is there, voices calling their names from deep between the trees, radios filling with static at the exact moment someone turns to look, and the overwhelming feeling that whatever lives in these forests does not want to be found and does not want witnesses. America's wilderness is massive, beautiful, and deadly, stretching across millions of acres where trees grow so dense they block out sunlight even at noon, where fog rolls in without warning and swallows entire landscapes in seconds, where sound behaves strangely, bending and traveling in directions it shouldn't, and where a person can walk 10 feet off a marked trail and never find it again. These forests are marketed as places of peace, escape, and adventure, but those who work closest to them understand a darker truth. Because the deeper you go, the more the rules of the outside world seem to weaken, and the forest begins to feel less like a place and more like something alive, something watching, waiting, and patient beyond human comprehension. National parks across the United States are some of the most visited wilderness areas in the world, drawing millions of hikers, campers, photographers, and families every year. Yet they are also the locations of some of the most unexplained disappearances ever recorded. From the dense woods of the Pacific Northwest to the ancient forests of the Appalachians, from the fog-heavy mountain ranges of California to the endless green corridors of the Rockies, people vanish in ways that defy logic and experience. These are not always beginners making careless mistakes. Many victims are seasoned hikers, hunters, former military personnel, and survival experts who understand navigation, terrain, and emergency procedures. Yet something happens in these forests that knowledge and preparation cannot prevent. Protected forest reserves are even more isolated. Vast stretches of land where access is limited, maps are outdated, and entire zones are closed to the public without explanation. In these areas, cell signals die instantly, GPS devices malfunction, compasses spin slowly off course, and electronic equipment fails without reason. Rangers quietly admit that there are places within these forests where even they do not go, especially after sunset, because darkness changes everything. Trees that seem harmless in daylight become towering silhouettes at night, blocking the sky and trapping sound, while shadows stretch unnaturally between trunks, as if something unseen is moving just beyond the edge of human vision. Hunters who have spent decades tracking animals in these woods will tell you there are areas they avoid completely, places where the forest feels wrong, where birds go silent, insects stop buzzing, and even the wind seems to hold its breath. These are not superstitious people, but they trust instinct more than logic, and instinct tells them that some places are not meant to be entered. Campers report feeling watched from the moment they arrive, as if eyes are following them through the trees, measuring every movement, waiting for the moment they are most vulnerable. The longer they stay, the stronger the sensation becomes, until sleep is impossible and every sound feels deliberate. Disappearances often begin the same way, with normal decisions and small mistakes that should not lead to tragedy. A hiker steps off the trail to take a photograph. A child wanders a few feet away while parents unpack supplies. A camper follows a strange sound thinking it might be an animal or another person in trouble. Witnesses later say it only took minutes, sometimes seconds, for the person to vanish. There are no screams, no struggle, no signs of panic, only the sudden absence of someone who was just there. When search teams arrive, they often find shoes placed neatly side by side, clothes folded as if deliberately removed, and personal belongings left behind in ways that do not match accidents or animal attacks. Weather changes frequently coincide with these vanishings, clear skies turning into heavy fog, sudden rainstorms, or unnatural drops in temperature that disorient search efforts. Dogs trained to track human scent will follow trails confidently until they reach a specific point, and then stop, whine, and refuse to move forward no matter how much they are encouraged. Some dogs turn back toward handlers with visible fear, tails tucked, as if they sense something humans cannot. Authorities document these details quietly, often closing cases without explanation, labeling them as accidents or voluntary disappearances despite overwhelming inconsistencies. The forest has its own rules, and those rules do not align with human expectations. Sound travels strangely, making voices seem closer or farther than they are, sometimes mimicking familiar tones to lure people deeper into isolation. Campers report hearing loved ones call their names from the darkness, only to realize everyone in their group is accounted for. Others describe footsteps circling their tents at night, slow and deliberate, stopping whenever they hold their breath, resuming the moment they move. Tents shake violently with no wind, shadows pass across fabric walls, and the sense of being hunted becomes overwhelming, not by animals, but by something intelligent enough to wait. Search and rescue teams are trained to push past fear, yet even they report moments when operations are stopped abruptly due to unsafe conditions, vague explanations that hide deeper truths. Radios cut out only in certain areas, batteries drain instantly, and GPS devices show impossible readings. Rangers place warning signs too late after patterns emerge after too many people have already vanished. Some rules are never written down, passed verbally between staff, warnings given quietly to those who ask too many questions. If you hear your name called from the trees, do not answer. If you feel watched, leave immediately. If the forest goes silent, turn back. Those who claim to have survived encounters within these forests often return changed, unable to explain where they were or what happened during missing time that can span days or even weeks. Their memories are fragmented, filled with images of endless trees, shifting shadows, and the feeling of being observed constantly. Many develop intense fear of darkness, silence, and wooded areas, while others refuse to speak about their experience ever again, their silence more disturbing than any story. Psychologists struggle to explain these cases, labeling them trauma-induced, yet similarities between accounts suggest something far more coordinated and intentional. Theories surrounding these disappearances terrify even rational minds, ranging from ancient entities believed to predate human settlement, to inhuman predators capable of understanding human behavior, to locations where reality itself seems unstable. Some believe there are areas of forest that act as gateways, places where people step across invisible boundaries and are no longer in the world they recognize. Government documents hint at restricted zones, unexplained closures, and classified incidents that never reach public records. Entire sections of forest are suddenly off-limits, with no explanation beyond vague environmental concerns. Before people vanish, many report seeing things they cannot explain. Tall shadow figures standing motionless between trees, eyes reflecting light at impossible heights, voices that sound exactly like loved ones despite no one being there. The feeling is not of being lost but of being chosen, targeted by something that understands fear, curiosity, and human weakness. This is why experienced hikers disappear just as often as beginners, because experience does not protect against something that does not follow natural laws. In the end, the forest decides who leaves. Warnings exist, but they are ignored, dismissed as superstition, because humans believe knowledge gives control. Yet these forests existed long before trails, maps, and rescue teams, and they will exist long after. If you are watching this before planning a camping trip, think carefully because some forests do not want visitors, and once they choose you, there is no map back. Many people enter these forests every year, trusting beauty and familiarity, but the forest decides who leaves. The disappearances nobody can explain rarely begin with panic, and that is what makes them so disturbing, because most victims are calm, confident, and unaware that they are already being watched long before they vanish. Families recall how normal everything felt just moments before, how laughter echoed through the trees, how backpacks were adjusted, how water bottles were passed around, and then suddenly someone was missing, not gradually drifting away, but gone as if the forest itself had blinked. Parents describe turning their heads for only a second to respond to another child, and when they looked back, the space where their son or daughter stood was empty, silent, untouched, with no sound of footsteps fading into the distance, no cries for help, no indication of direction, only trees standing still like witnesses refusing to speak. Campers disappear in similar ways, often during daylight, which makes authorities uncomfortable, because it removes the usual explanations of darkness or poor visibility. Groups set up camps together, mark boundaries, agree on rules, and yet individuals vanish within minutes of stepping away to collect firewood or use the bathroom. In some cases, companions are only yards away when it happens, later insisting that they felt an odd pressure in their ears, a sudden dizziness, or a moment where the forest seemed unnaturally quiet. By the time the sensation passes, the person is gone, and calling their name only deepens the silence, as if sound itself is being absorbed by the trees. Experienced hikers are among the most unsettling cases, because they know how to survive, how to orient themselves, how to remain calm when conditions change. Some carry satellite phones, emergency beacons, multiple navigation tools, and yet their trails end abruptly in places that make no sense. Search teams find boot prints that simply stop, as if the person vanished mid-step, with no signs of falling, climbing, or being dragged. In several documented cases, the terrain ahead is open and visible, offering no hiding places, yet the individual is nowhere to be seen, leaving behind only questions that authorities quietly file away. One of the most disturbing patterns is the way personal belongings are found, because they do not match accidents or animal attacks. Shoes are discovered neatly placed side by side, sometimes miles from the nearest trail, with no signs of damage or struggle. Clothing is folded carefully, laid out in ways that suggest intention rather than panic. Backpacks are recovered untouched, containing food, water, and navigation tools that should never be abandoned voluntarily. These scenes confuse investigators because they suggest cooperation, compliance, or an altered mental state, something forcing people to remove what protects them before they disappear. Weather plays a strange role in these cases, often changing suddenly and violently just after someone vanishes. Clear skies turn into dense fog within minutes, rain falls without forecast, temperatures drop sharply even in summer, and visibility collapses, making immediate searches impossible. By the time conditions improve, trails are obscured, scents are gone, and the forest appears to have reset itself, erasing evidence with unsettling efficiency. Some rangers quietly admit that these weather shifts feel localized, as if centered around the disappearance itself, rather than part of a broader pattern. Authorities publicly close many cases with familiar explanations: accidents, animal encounters, exposure, or voluntary disappearance, yet internal reports reveal discomfort and confusion. Search efforts sometimes end suddenly without clear reason, despite favorable conditions and available resources. Families are left with vague statements and sympathy, while critical details are withheld or classified. The lack of answers creates an emotional void more painful than confirmation of death, because uncertainty allows fear to grow unchecked, feeding the belief that something far worse than an accident is happening in these forests. The final moments before disappearance are sometimes captured, unintentionally, through audio recordings that were never meant to be evidence. Lost hikers leave voice memos on their phones, calm at first, explaining that they feel disoriented despite following marked trails, that sounds seem closer than they should be, that they feel watched even though they see no one. As minutes pass, their voices change, breathing becomes shallow, and confusion turns into fear. Some recordings end abruptly with the hiker whispering that something is standing between the trees, watching without moving. Emergency calls from forest edges are among the most chilling, because they capture fear in real time. Dispatchers report callers describing footsteps circling them, voices repeating their words seconds after they speak, and the overwhelming certainty that they are not alone. In several cases, callers say they can see someone standing just beyond the tree line, tall and motionless, refusing to respond. Dispatchers attempt to keep them calm, asking for location details, but the line fills with static, broken sentences, and then silence. Search teams later find the caller's phone on the ground, battery drained, screen cracked, with no sign of the person. Radio transmissions from park rangers tell similar stories, often cutting out mid-sentence as if something intervened deliberately. Rangers describe seeing movement where there should be none, hearing their names called over the radio by voices that do not belong to any known colleague, and feeling an instinctive urge to leave immediately. Some transmissions end with heavy breathing, hurried footsteps, and a final statement that something is watching from the trees, followed by static that refuses to clear. These recordings are rarely released publicly, but those who have heard them describe an unnatural quality to the sounds, as if the forest itself is interfering. Anonymous accounts from rangers reveal areas they avoid after sunset, places marked unofficially as dangerous not because of terrain, but because of repeated incidents that defy explanation. New staff are warned quietly, told never to enter certain zones alone, never to respond to voices, and never to follow lights seen between trees. Some rules are passed verbally, never written down, because putting them on paper would raise questions that authorities do not want to answer. Warning signs are placed only after patterns emerge, often too late to prevent further disappearances. Witnesses who spend time near these areas report seeing things that challenge rational thought: tall shadowy figures standing perfectly still between trees, visible only when not looked at directly, disappearing the moment attention is focused on them. Others describe eyes reflecting light at heights far above known animals, watching silently from the darkness. Voices mimic loved ones with perfect accuracy, calling names, asking for help, luring people deeper into isolation. Footsteps follow campers at a measured pace, stopping whenever the camper stops, resuming the moment they move again, creating the terrifying impression of being studied. Tents shake violently at night with no wind, poles bending inward as if pressed from the outside, while campers inside freeze, afraid to speak or move. The silence that follows is worse than the noise, because it feels deliberate, controlled, as if whatever caused the disturbance is waiting for a reaction. Survivors say the most terrifying part is the certainty that they are not lost, not confused, but being hunted, selected by something that understands fear and patience. Theories attempting to explain these events range from ancient entities tied to the land itself, to inhuman predators capable of manipulating perception, to locations where reality behaves unpredictably. Some believe these forests are older than recorded history, holding secrets that modern science cannot explain. Others point to patterns of government intervention, restricted zones, and unexplained closures as evidence that authorities know more than they admit. Documents hint at incidents labeled as environmental hazards, while quietly removing access to entire areas without explanation. Survivors who return are rarely the same, often unable to explain where they were or what happened during missing time. Days or weeks pass without memory, replaced by flashes of endless trees, shifting shadows, and the sensation of being watched constantly. Many develop intense fear responses to silence, darkness, or wooded areas, while some refuse to speak at all, their silence more unsettling than any description. Psychologists struggle to categorize these cases, because trauma alone does not explain the consistency of experiences across unrelated individuals. Search teams sometimes stop operations abruptly, citing unsafe conditions that are never fully explained. Equipment fails only in specific zones, radios die simultaneously, and trained dogs refuse to proceed, pulling against their handlers with visible distress. Some team members report feeling a sudden sense of dread, so strong it overrides training, an instinctive understanding that continuing would be a mistake. When asked later, they struggle to articulate why, saying only that it felt like they were not wanted there. Warnings exist, but they are often ignored, dismissed as superstition or exaggeration, because humans believe preparation equals safety. Never follow voices, never leave the trail, never hike alone, never camp near tree lines, rules that experienced hikers know well, yet still disappear. The forest does not discriminate, taking beginners and experts alike, because experience does not protect against something that does not follow natural laws. In the end, the pattern remains unchanged. People enter the forest expecting beauty and escape, unaware that something within is watching, waiting for the moment they step just far enough away to never return. Rangers who have spent years working inside America's forests rarely speak publicly about what they have seen, not because they lack stories, but because they understand that some things sound unbelievable until you experience them yourself, and once you do, you realize words are inadequate. Anonymous accounts collected quietly over decades reveal a pattern of fear that runs deeper than official reports, a shared understanding among those who patrol these lands that certain areas are not just dangerous but wrong. These zones are avoided after sunset, sometimes avoided altogether, not marked clearly on public maps, and spoken about only in hushed tones during late-night shifts when the forest outside feels too close. New rangers are trained in navigation, rescue procedures, wildlife behavior, and emergency response, but there are unwritten rules they learn quickly from those who have survived long enough to pass them on. Never respond to voices calling your name from the trees, even if they sound exactly like a coworker you trust. Never investigate lights seen moving between trees at night. Never follow footsteps you cannot see. If the forest goes silent, leave immediately because silence is never natural. These rules are not part of any handbook, but they are treated with the seriousness of law, because ignoring them has consequences that cannot be undone. Some rangers describe entire valleys or stretches of forest where radio communication fails consistently, regardless of equipment upgrades or weather conditions. Batteries drain rapidly, GPS units show impossible locations, and compasses spin slowly as if confused. Attempts to investigate these anomalies are often abandoned, labeled as technical issues or environmental interference, yet the same problems repeat only in specific areas. Rangers who push too far report overwhelming feelings of dread, nausea, and disorientation, as if the forest itself is rejecting their presence, forcing them to retreat. Warning signs placed at trailheads are often the result of internal debates, compromises between public access and ranger safety. Families see signs warning of wildlife or rough terrain, unaware that deeper concerns exist beyond what is written. Some signs are placed too late, after patterns of disappearances become impossible to ignore, after enough reports accumulate to justify action without explanation. Entire trails are closed suddenly, campsites removed, and access points blocked under the guise of conservation, while the real reasons remain unspoken. Witnesses who encounter something before disappearing often describe the same unsettling visuals: tall shadowy figures standing between trees, not moving, not advancing, simply watching. These figures are difficult to focus on, appearing clearer in peripheral vision and fading when stared at directly, creating the impression that they exist just outside normal perception. Some survivors say these figures seem aware of being observed, shifting position the moment attention wavers, always maintaining distance while guiding victims deeper into isolation. Eyes are another recurring detail, reflecting light from impossible heights, watching silently without blinking. These are not animal eyes, not positioned where known wildlife would be, and not behaving according to natural instincts. Campers report seeing these eyes surrounding their camps at night, dozens of them, appearing and disappearing without sound, creating a sense of being surrounded by something intelligent and coordinated. Attempts to shine lights toward them result in darkness swallowing the beam, as if the forest absorbs illumination rather than reflecting it. Voices are perhaps the most effective tool, because they exploit trust and emotion. People hear loved ones calling their names, asking for help, sounding frightened or injured. The voices repeat phrases perfectly, sometimes mimicking conversations heard earlier in the day, creating familiarity that lowers defenses. Those who follow these voices often disappear quickly, leaving behind no evidence of struggle. Survivors say resisting the urge to respond requires intense mental effort, because the voices feel urgent, personal, and emotionally manipulative. Footsteps following campers are described with disturbing consistency, slow, deliberate, matching pace precisely. When campers stop, the footsteps stop. When they move, the footsteps resume, always just out of sight. This behavior suggests observation rather than pursuit, as if something is studying reactions, waiting for the right moment. The feeling of being hunted grows stronger over time, not through aggression, but through patience, creating psychological pressure that wears down rational thought. Tents shaking at night is another phenomenon reported across different forests and states, with no clear explanation. Campers wake to violent movement, poles bending inward, fabric pulling tight as if pressed from the outside. There is no wind, no animal sounds, no visible cause. When the shaking stops, silence returns abruptly, heavier than before, leaving campers frozen in fear, unsure whether to flee or remain still. Survivors say the silence feels intentional, as if whatever caused the disturbance is waiting to see what they will do next. Theories attempting to explain these experiences range from ancient entities tied to the land itself, beings believed to predate human civilization, and view people as temporary intruders. Indigenous legends speak of forest spirits, guardians, and shapeshifters that punish those who disrespect sacred spaces, stories dismissed by modern society, yet eerily aligned with contemporary reports. Others believe these forests harbor inhuman predators that understand human behavior, capable of mimicry, patience, and psychological manipulation, traits far beyond known wildlife. More unsettling theories suggest that certain areas act as gateways where reality behaves unpredictably, places where people step across invisible boundaries and enter environments that do not follow the same rules. Survivors describe spaces where time feels distorted, where walking for minutes feels like hours, or where days pass without hunger or exhaustion. These accounts challenge scientific explanation, yet similarities between unrelated stories raise uncomfortable questions about what might exist beyond normal perception. Government involvement fuels speculation further, with documents hinting at restricted zones, unexplained closures, and incidents classified under environmental or national security concerns. Entire sections of forest are suddenly deemed off-limits, patrols increased, and access points removed without clear justification. Those who inquire too deeply are met with vague answers, redirected, or discouraged from pursuing information. While no official confirmation exists, the pattern suggests knowledge withheld for reasons beyond public safety. Survivors who return alive are perhaps the most haunting evidence, because they carry the aftermath of encounters that leave lasting scars. Many are found disoriented, dehydrated, and injured in ways that do not match terrain or weather conditions. They cannot explain where they were or how they survived, offering fragmented memories of endless trees, shifting shadows, and the feeling of being watched constantly. Time gaps of days or weeks are common, with no recollection of events during that period. Psychological evaluations struggle to categorize these experiences because trauma alone does not explain the consistency across cases. Survivors develop intense fear responses to silence, darkness, and wooded environments, experiencing panic attacks triggered by the sound of wind through leaves or the sight of tree lines at dusk. Some refuse to return to forests under any circumstances, while others refuse to speak about their experiences entirely, their silence heavy with unspoken terror. Families of the missing often cling to survivor stories, hoping for answers or closure, yet these accounts offer little comfort. The idea that loved ones may still be somewhere within the forest, alive but unreachable, trapped beyond understanding, is more terrifying than death. This uncertainty haunts communities near these forests, shaping local behavior, traditions, and warnings pass quietly between residents. Search teams involved in these cases carry their own trauma, haunted by moments when instinct overrode training, equipment failures occurring simultaneously, dogs refusing to advance, sudden feelings of dread that force retreats. These experiences leave lasting impressions on those tasked with rescue. Some team members leave the profession entirely, unable to reconcile what they felt with official explanations. In the end, the forest remains unchanged, continuing to draw visitors with promises of beauty and escape. Trails are maintained, maps updated, and safety guidelines distributed. Yet the disappearances continue, following the same patterns, repeating the same details. The forest does not need to chase or trap. It waits, confident that curiosity, trust, and human nature will bring people just close enough to cross boundaries they cannot see. Boundaries that once crossed rarely allow return. Search operations do not always end because hope is lost, and that is what unsettles those involved the most, because there are times when teams are pulled out abruptly despite good weather, available resources, and strong leads. Official statements cite unsafe conditions, yet those present know the danger is not falling trees or rough terrain, but something harder to explain, something that makes trained professionals abandon missions without debate. Radios fail simultaneously, batteries drain within minutes, and the air feels heavy, pressing down on the chest, triggering a sense of dread so intense it overrides logic. Team leaders give the order to retreat, and no one questions it because everyone feels it, the unmistakable understanding that continuing would be a mistake. Dogs trained to track human scent react strongly in these moments, following trails confidently until they reach a specific point where they stop abruptly, ears back, bodies tense, refusing to move forward. Handlers report never seeing animals behave this way under normal conditions, as if the dogs sense a presence humans cannot. Some whine, others growl at empty spaces between trees, and a few attempt to flee entirely, pulling against their leashes with panic. These reactions are documented quietly, dismissed publicly as anomalies, yet they repeat across forests and states with disturbing consistency. Equipment failures are another recurring theme, occurring only within certain zones, not randomly or gradually, but suddenly and completely. Flashlights flicker and die, radios fill with static, GPS devices show impossible readings, and even analog tools like compasses become unreliable. Attempts to troubleshoot are futile, because stepping a few feet back restores functionality, while moving forward triggers failure again. This invisible boundary reinforces the belief that some areas are not meant to be entered, that crossing them invites consequences beyond understanding. Those involved in search operations often report hearing things they cannot explain, voices calling from deep within the trees, footsteps circling just beyond sight, and sudden movements that vanish when approached. Some describe feeling watched constantly, as if eyes follow every step, evaluating reactions and intentions. The forest seems aware of their presence, responding to intrusion with subtle pressure rather than aggression, encouraging withdrawal without confrontation. Warnings given to the public are intentionally vague, focusing on common-sense safety rules that do little to address the true risks. Never hike alone, stay on marked trails, carry emergency supplies, rules that assume danger comes from human error or wildlife. Yet experienced hikers follow these guidelines and still disappear, because preparation does not protect against something that manipulates perception and behavior. The forest exploits curiosity, empathy, and confidence, drawing people just far enough away to isolate them completely. Voices remain one of the most effective tools, because they bypass logic and target emotion. Hearing your name spoken in a familiar tone triggers instinctive response, a desire to help, to connect, to answer. Those who resist describe intense psychological pressure, as if something is pushing against their thoughts, urging compliance. The longer they ignore the voices, the louder and more urgent they become, repeating phrases, changing tone, mimicking distress until the urge to respond becomes overwhelming. Those who follow voices often leave behind personal items in deliberate ways, removing shoes, folding clothes, abandoning backpacks, actions that suggest altered mental states rather than panic. Some theorize that compliance is part of the process, that victims are encouraged to shed tools and protection before crossing boundaries. Whether through manipulation, fear, or something else entirely, the result is the same: disappearance without evidence. Survivors who return provide fragmented insight into what might lie beyond these boundaries, describing environments that feel familiar yet wrong, endless forests with no landmarks, light that never fully brightens or darkens, and the constant sensation of being observed. Time behaves unpredictably, with hours feeling like minutes or days passing without awareness. Hunger and exhaustion fade, replaced by numbness, making survival possible yet meaningless. These accounts challenge scientific explanation, yet similarities suggest shared experiences rather than individual hallucinations. Some survivors recall being guided rather than chased, led deeper into isolation by subtle cues rather than force. Paths appear briefly, voices offer reassurance, and fear is managed carefully, preventing panic that might cause resistance. This calculated approach suggests intelligence, patience, and understanding of human psychology, traits far more unsettling than simple predation. The goal does not appear to be immediate harm, but removal, taking people away from the world they know. Families of the missing live in a state of permanent uncertainty, caught between hope and grief, unable to move forward without answers. Communities near these forests develop quiet traditions, unspoken rules about where to go and where not to linger. Locals warn visitors subtly, advising them to leave before dusk, to ignore strange sounds, to trust instinct without explanation. These warnings are often dismissed until it is too late. Government responses remain minimal and carefully worded, emphasizing safety while avoiding acknowledgement of patterns that suggest something more. Restricted zones expand gradually, access points close, and patrols increase without explanation. Requests for transparency are met with deflection, reinforcing suspicions that knowledge exists beyond what is shared publicly. Whether to prevent panic or conceal truth, the result is the same: unanswered questions and continued disappearances. The forest does not need to reveal itself, because it relies on human nature to do the work. Curiosity draws people in, empathy lowers defenses, confidence encourages risk, and isolation completes the process. Trails, maps, and technology create an illusion of control that disappears the moment boundaries are crossed. Once inside, escape is not about distance or direction, but about permission, something the forest rarely grants. If you are watching this before planning a camping trip, think carefully, because not all dangers are visible, and not all threats announce themselves. Some forests do not want visitors, And the warning signs are subtle silence where sound should exist, paths that feel wrong, the sensation of being watched. Trust these signals, because ignoring them has consequences that cannot be undone. Many people enter America's forests every year seeking beauty, peace, and adventure, believing preparation guarantees safety. But the forest decides who leaves, and once it chooses you, there is no map back, no signal strong enough, no voice loud enough to guide you home. The trees will stand, the trails will remain, and life will continue as if nothing happened. While somewhere beyond understanding, the forest keeps what it has taken, silent, patient, and waiting.